Welcome, welcome. I want to welcome everyone to a very special feedback chat we are doing today, or as I like to say, feed black. But we are going to be tuning in and just having a great discussion today with someone that was welcomed back from our Kwanzaa conversation series with Richard Pellegrino, who has been literally pioneering coalition building as well as real assessment and atonement for you're talking about generations of not only injustices done to African Americans, particularly, and for a big part of his time exclusively, but also in recognition of just a very disadvantaged, demographics in our communities. We are going to be discussing his novel. Well, it's not a novel. It's more of like an autobiographical search, through a one man's journey from whiteness to wokeness. I love that. I love that. And we're going to be talking more about that and what that entails and what that means. Because it's very easy to say that, we're waking up and we're grabbing on to all of these nuances and all of these particulars that we never really entertained in our youth. But it's a whole other thing to have the honesty, because there's a whole lot of cognitive dissonance that happens with this transition or this shift. But there's something to be said about the honesty that is needed from the oppressive society to say, what, this is something that we were raised to do. This is something that we were literally born into. This is something that we particularly don't address because it does not affect us. Okay? There's one thing to say, "Oh, I didn't know," but there's another thing to say, "Oh yeah, we knew. We know." But this is how we are. This is how we are coming to atone for. This is how we are pioneering change to address it. This is what we are doing to make things more cohesive. Hey, Naima, welcome, welcome. Thank you for tuning in, because I know I definitely I know we're getting this crazy weather. I know you're getting it in Virginia. So thank you for tuning in, Naima. This is an amazing discussion that I think that absolutely you're going to find some interest in as well. And you all, when we're coming in, as we're coming in, because again, this went out to a very wide and vast network. You want to just, announce, hey, I'm here from, Virginia. I'm here from New York. I'm here from Wisconsin. We want to really get to know who's tuning into this conversation, because these are the types of discussions that really bring about change. Because these are the discussions that bring about inspiring and motivating into action. And because without these type of discussions, remember, you all, there's no transition from here to there. Without these type of discussions, without these meetings at the table, there is no real inspiration or encouragement. And we have a very special guest tuning in from the Bronx. Oh, babe. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. We are going to bring Richard up to the stage because we don't want to delay this. We thank everyone for their time and tuning in today, and we are going to really get into it. And when I tell you we're going to get into it, we're going to get into it. This is not going to be fluff. There may be uncomfortable notes throughout this conversation, but it absolutely will be inspiration and motivation for you to pioneer change in your walk as well. So without further ado, we're going to bring to the stage good friend and colleague. Hello, hello, Richard.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for that introduction and setting the bar so high now that I have to help reach. But thanks, Courtney, and thanks anyone and everyone who tunes in on your Sunday afternoon. Appreciate that. Sorry,
Absolutely.
I'm in the dark a little here, but hopefully the discussion will bring us all into the light.
Into
And
the light. Yeah, the same. I said when we first started, the sun was coming out. I was like, oh, we got some great sun. And
yeah,
then about 10 minutes ago, the sun kind of said, nah, I changed my mind.
well, one of the things that is part of reality is change. Change.
Mm,
That's one thing we cannot escape is change, and
okay.
hopefully we're going to move towards progressive change and not steps backwards. And that's part of the whole discussion. And thanks for slipping and calling my book a novel, because it is actually it is novel in some ways, but the joke is, my kids and my wife and my friends fact checked a lot of my stories to make sure that they're accurate, because this is covering 6, 7 decades. And
Mm.
so, if I if and when I make this book into a movie, which I'm planning to do, um, I will put at the beginning that this is based on a true story. It might not every fact might not be 100% true, but you'll get the gist.
I,
Uh,
I think that's very wise. That's very wise. And I think I want to be, I'm very good at, I guess, casting. And so I would love to be in a part of that ground room floor when we're talking about who's going to play you. Because I'm really into things like that.
okay.
But Richard, I do want to get started because let me tell you, um, it's always a breath of fresh air to me when I'm able to I'm able to take in, or I like to say be a fly on the wall, so to speak, with someone that is willing to be honest with their story. I'm always very attracted to that. I've you know I study. I study dynasties. I study movements, and these particular things, or these particular realities are literally started with usually a person that made a decision, right? And so I don't want to offend anyone with the people that I have when I'm having these type of conversations. I never want to offend anyone with the people that I have necessarily studied, or necessarily given way, or given some thought to their particular processes, because I said it takes a lot of strength to personally, I feel, to tell your story even when you're not the hero. And
Mhm,
I learned that the hard way with my own novel, which
mhm,
was definitely had some autobiographical notes. And
mhm.
people said, I can't believe you would say that, like, because I can't believe it. And I was like, this is who I am, who I was. So you could also see, the transition. You can also understand and appreciate the transition. So sometimes things like this are harder to write, and that's why I said I don't want to offend people when I'm talking about my appreciation for these type of stories, because my appreciation for these type of stories have meant that I've read the autobiographies of Adolf Hitler. I've read autobiographies of Marilyn Monroe. I've read autobiographies of Stalin, Idi Amin. I don't. I think that a lot of times people just want to, it's very typical, or it's comfortable for us to say, oh yeah, let's read a autobiography of Oprah Winfrey and Denzel Washington, and let's read things that make us feel good. But no, when we're talking about people that have literally influenced dynamic change, or have been the motivation for cultural shifts, it does not matter to me whether it makes me feel good or not. I want to know the story. I want to know what prompted. I want to know the motivations, the inspirations, and the influences of these particular figures. And
Mhm.
so I do want to know, first and foremost, what prompted you to say, you know what, I'm going to tell this story, and I'm going to be honest with who I am and what I've been through, and tell this story in this light. What prompted you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Courtney. It's a great segue into my introduction. Uh, yeah, I mean, really part of it was my legacy. I have a large family, a large intentional community, 8 grown children, 7 grandchildren so far. And I've been telling these stories of my, that I've experienced and the lessons I've learned to them, for decades. When we drove from Atlanta to New York, 16-hour drives all the time, the whole way I'm telling stories. And some of which were uncomfortable for my wife, especially because they were not, they were somewhat risque and somewhat negative to confrontational things and like that. So anyway, I decided, really, I mean, I wrote the book, yeah, definitely for others, for my family and so forth, but really it's my own catharsis to look back over my life and the lessons that I've learned and how I've applied them, and I'm still learning. We're all learning. So really it's an exercise in searching for one's authentic identity, which again is a lifelong search. If we stop, then we're dead, basically, whether spiritually or literally. And so I figured, I've had a somewhat storied life. It can be several Netflix series, The Adventures. So that's a shameless plug for you to read the book, but and watch the movie when it comes out. But uh, but the lessons that I've learned, and really, it's in the title. Uh, of course, I am not white was the provocative question. Oh, really? Then what are you? Uh, but one man's journey from whiteness to oneness, and I like what you said. Well, from oneness to wokefulness. Okay, um, because that's my journey. That's not your journey, obviously, right? You have your own journey. Each person has their own journey, but there's a lot of common ground. Hopefully, this will inspire others to do the same. Write your memoir, write your
Right.
history. Whether you publish it or not, it doesn't matter, because share it. Just sharing it, even with your close friends and family, and learning from it, and it helps you self check where you're at in this process. So I've put together worksheets too, for developing your or discovering your authentic identity, and also once you discover your authentic identity, uh, or you're discovering it, then you want to also discover your national identity, your cultural identity, your community identity. See, it all fits into place. But if you're not sure who you are, it's hard to find. That's really, to me, the brainwashing and indoctrination of America, what I've learned. And by the way, everything I say is my opinion. You know, check it out. It's not gospel truth. It's my opinion based on my experiences. In the book, I give plenty of references for anything that I say that's factual. But it's just my opinion. There's truth, objective truth. There's my truth, and there's your truth. So let's look at everything from those angles. That you know did you know, I learned recently, even when you're looking through your physical eyes and physical senses, right,
Mhm.
that you only see what's in front of you. The peripheral, your brain adds that based on your memory. Okay,
Right.
so you're not even seeing
The full
physically
picture. You're
the
not
same,
seeing the
right?
full picture.
Right,
Right.
and so each one of us is seeing. That's why if there's an accident, everybody has a different, you know,
Different
description.
perspective.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so that's the only way that we can get together and really learn. Because if you think your perspective is right and I think mine is right, and he or she thinks theirs is right, that's the end of the discussion. That's
Right.
it. You know,
Right.
like, my religion is the best, or, whatever, you
Right.
know, yeah, okay, that's your religion. Okay. That's the key word. It's yours. It's not the religion. Okay.
Right.
It's your perspective. And so that's the only way we can, that's a ground rule before I get into discussions or debates with anyone. Let's let's make the ground level.
Right.
Okay. Okay. That's equity before equality,
Mm,
which is an
mm.
important theme. So a little bit of housekeeping with the book. And by the way, interrupt me, Courtney, anytime. One of the housekeeping thing is we want this to be interactive discussion. So I'm going to go decade by decade. You know, I've been alive almost 7 decades. So that's why I wrote the book. So definitely at the end of each decade, I'm going to stop and ask for feedback. If you have anybody has any relationship to what I've shared in that decade or whatever that comes out of it. But feel free to anyone to comment, question before that, interrupt me. That's fine because we love it to be interactive. So the few definitions. By the way, I know, even though I say I'm not white, and that's a reality, by the way, because nobody is white. We'll talk about that in a minute. No,
Right.
okay,
Yeah. Let's talk
nobody's
about
white,
the decision.
right?
Yeah.
And so, but
Title placement.
yeah, of course, my first page is the author's disclaimer. Of course, I know I'm white identified in this society, and I have all of the unearned privilege that goes along with that. As a matter of fact, my story is a story of of unbelievable privilege. My whole story, you know what I'm saying? Even well, we'll talk about it more, but of unearned privilege just because I was identified as white in this society. Okay, until we accept that as white identified people, we can't really move on. How can you have a level playing field if you've given, you know, if you're in a race and you've been given a massive head start, you know, so that's part of the whole equal, you know, equalizing, I would say. But anyway, so that's a disclaimer, and a few definitions. Okay, you hit on one. Woke. What is woke to me? It's a positive thing. It's aware. It's enlightened. It's the word woke, awakened. Okay, people can turn it into whatever negative or whatever they want, but that's what it means. Okay, awake to the social injustices, awake to the realities, awake to the good and the bad and the ugly. Okay, so but to me, the ultimate wokefulness, enlightenment, awakening is a recognition and acknowledgement of our oneness. Okay, so woke equals oneness. That's why I said from one man's journey from whiteness to oneness, or you know, okay, because that is, in my belief, again, maybe that's not true. Maybe we're not one with, you know, maybe we are different levels. Who knows? But in my understanding, we're one. Okay, and that's the platform from which I write, I live, I do my work, and so forth. That we're not only one with each other, and we have to find our essential oneness and common ground, but with all living things, with the animal kingdom, plant kingdom, and the mineral kingdom. Okay, so you know that's a spiritual oneness. That's my definition. I'll also, throughout the book and when I'm talking, use the term beloved community. Okay, that was a vision that MLK didn't invent that. He inherited that from other spiritual leaders. And uh, a short definition of beloved community, I add intentional beloved community because we have to be intentional of what we're doing. I'm intentional about searching for my authentic identity. I have to be intentional about whatever I'm doing, building community. Um, and so uh, he, MLK, who's my founding father, and by the way, he and Coretta, I knew Coretta. I didn't know Dr. King. Obviously, he died before I could meet him. Um, but I knew Coretta, and I met the family and so forth. And so they're my founding family. I use them. They're the founding family of the new America. Okay, they're the founding father and mother in my book because that's when we finally started to acknowledge what's in the Declaration of Independence, start to acknowledge and build beloved community upon the fact that all men and women are created equal. and are entitled, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's when it started in the 60s. So we're a fledgling new nation based on that principle. But back to so beloved community, and a quick definition of that is devoid of the triple evils that Dr. King also pointed out, of racism, poverty, and militarism, which are all interrelated. Once we get rid of one, the others follow. We can't address just one without the others. And Dr. King in his life, of course, started on racism and civil rights, and had successes there, and was mowed down when he attempted to attack the other evils. And that
Of
was
course,
no coincidence at all,
none.
in my book, and literally in my book with references.
In my book, yeah.
So uh, so those are some of the definitions we work with. Okay. Any questions or comments on any of those definitions before we proceed with my story?
Well, there was a comment that came up when you after you started shortly. All modern cries of systemic racism in the U.S. are top-down elitist rhetoric. This is from Saint Michael of Cigarillo. Thank you so much for that comment. And I think that we get into that discussion as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us where you're from, also, Saint Michael. Something that came up when you were on last time, and we both, um, kind of were uh, going over when we were going over debriefing the conversation, the term of a perspective of privilege, and this is I think a very much consistent theme in your book, where you're showing that from your perspective of having, like you said, you're not just looking straight forward at what you're looking at, you're realizing what you're looking at when you're looking. That's a difference of having a perspective, of realizing that you have a perspective, as opposed to just saying it's my perspective. It's realizing, hey, what this perspective is. I want us to really talk on that a lot more, because the reason why I think this particular topic, as people are still pouring into this live, the reason why I think it resonates, not just because the title is just so jarring, I am not white. What do you mean you're not white? But also when people get into the book and realizing that, oh shoot, I kind of do this. I embody this. I have these tendencies, because the term that is very, maybe overused, or maybe generally used now, is uh people say narcissistic, right? And so,
Mhm.
or people say narcissistic, and this is kind of has become synonymous with people that are aware that they are dating or involved with someone, or maybe even was birthed from someone who just has they have this particular perspective about themselves that definitely affects the people that are around them. And I think that this is the reason why, like I said, this topic does resonate with so many people, is because this is kind of like what woke has become.
Mhm.
It's become kind of like a um self-righteous, it almost appears. But
Right.
I love that throughout your book, throughout this journey, you're able to see that, there was a certain shift when you started to recognize these behaviors. And then this becomes not just recognizing them, but actually implementing and doing something about it. um, I know that the becoming a member of the Baha'i faith was a big component of that too, but there had to have been something in you that recognized that, hey, before it even, because without this recognition within yourself, you wouldn't have even have been able to appreciate what the Baha'i faith was bringing to you. And this is what I'm hoping. This is the hope that I am, literally holding on to. for others when they're taking in your work and when they are going through this their own journey is that they're open, as you said, to being able to identify those evils and
Hmm.
ways that they have participated in them, as well as ways that they have turned a blind eye to them. Now, so that kind of as you know, that kind of weighs into what I see what's coming in the room. So Saint Michael, a cigarillo says he's from what's that can is that Kansas City? KCMO? Is that Kansas City?
Yeah.
And Devon says, "What is the moment that made you walk this path?" Now that's very telling. I'm gonna let you get into it because that was a great segue, like I said, because it does say that. And then Michael also wants to know, are you Jewish or do you identify as Jewish? But
Right.
let's get into that and tackle those as you will.
Yeah. Thanks, Courtney. Yeah. Let me tell my story, and really, it's a story of starting out with great privilege, with great beliefs of supremacy, of white supremacy, being born into that mindset, which every white identified person in America is born into, and then the humbling process to bring me one to be equal. That's what really this story is about. Is but yeah, the by the way, I'm glad Michael asked that. Yeah, when I'm not white, what am I? I'm Italian. Okay, white. Nobody's white. That was a slave term that was invented in Portugal to justify slavery. White and black. No Europeans considered themselves white until they came to America. They were Irish, Italian, German, French, whatever they were, their culture. Okay, so part of the racism and indoctrination of America is deculturize, is to strip people's culture. Okay, that's how you control people. So, yeah, racism affected white people that way by stripping their culture, and they're unconscious of it. Of course, Africans, and all the references are in the book, they didn't consider themselves black. They were all shades. They considered themselves Ghanaian, Nigerian, not even that, more granular than that, Igbo, Yoruba, whatever tribe and nation they came from. So black and white are American European slave terms, and that's why I reject the label white. Okay, while I understand the delusional white supremacist uh, doctrine of America is labeling me as white, but that's not a true or authentic reality. So, so back to the story. Um, I was born in the 50s. It was called the fabulous 50s. Okay, who called it that? The elite, of course, and the white identified folk, because during the 50s, it wasn't too fabulous for people of color because you had sundown towns around the country where when the sun went down, if you were a person of color, you better not be caught on the street. And this is everywhere. This is not in the South. This is in New York. This is in Michigan. This is in the North and everywhere. That's the reality of what was going on in the 50s. Okay. I'm not even going to go before the 50s. I'm starting with the 50s when I was born. And probably most people in this call were born on the 50s or later. So that's where we're starting. Okay. Meanwhile, in the South was Jim Crow. Okay. Which, by the way, eventually I experienced firsthand in the Deep South. So when we talk about, all this joke about people, white identified people saying, "Oh man, I'm not responsible for all of these uh, racism and so forth." That happened centuries ago. That's BS. That happened in our lifetimes. Okay, in your lifetimes, if not yours, your parents. Okay, so don't say it far back and and withdrawn. This is true American history, and I understand why they don't want to teach it at school, because it's the truth. And my statement to the school board here in Cobb in Georgia was, okay, You don't want to teach black history before the 50s, 40s, whatever, then don't teach white history. Let's start in the 50s and 60s, okay? Because what I was taught in school was BS. But anyway, about our founding fathers and how great they were when they were genocidal, they were rapists, they were breeders, and so forth, okay? Okay. But I'm not judging. I'm saying everybody, everyone's got their good side, their high side, their low side, and has to develop that. But that's the reality. You can't hide the reality. You can't change things, and you can't get better if you deny what your faults are. So anyway, I was born in the 50s. I was born, if you're old enough to remember, All in the Family, Archie Bunker, and that family in Queens. That was the first sitcom that dealt with race. But my family was Italian when on both sides. When other cultures, even in New York, when other cultures moved into the neighborhood, the Puerto Ricans, the Italians moved out to Long Island. We started in Queens, moved out. Up north is still segregated to this day, more than the South, because it was never forced to integrate. Not in Manhattan, not in the inner city. There's still separate neighborhoods: the Italian neighborhood, the black neighborhood, the Polish neighborhood, whatever. But you're on top of each other, so you have to interact. But in the suburbs, still totally segregated. Long Island, everywhere. Okay, so the myth about this great northern, society. They had sundown towns and so forth. So that's what I was born into. But I was born into, you know, my parents loved me, they nurtured me, and I believed them. They told me if I swim with black kids, I'll turn black. You know, I mean, they they just passed down tradition from what they learned from their parents and grandparents. Okay, but I was lucky enough to be born into that time because I started to grow up in the 60s and then the 70s, which was a time of great awakening, when people decided, because of everything happened at once, it was a revolution, a spiritual revolution, and so forth. And people decided, no, we're not going to just believe in blind tradition any longer. Okay? We literally threw out everything, the baby with the bathwater, the good and the bad, and started new. That's why I say that's when America really, the new America, the America that's spelled with a C, not with a KKK in it, that's when it began. That's really the founding, the beginning of the Enlightenment, the age of Enlightenment. I'm not saying we were we made it, but that's when it started. So I was lucky to be born in that time. But I will give the credit to my parents. I was the oldest of four siblings. That they made me feel secure, loved, provided for me. And see, the theory of racism, of how racism is spread, used to be, my field is psychology. I was a counselor, therapist eventually. And we believed that if parents teach their children racist ideas, you're better, stay away from blacks are inferior, all the bullshit, that the kids are going to grow up with that. That was the theory. And of course, that affects people. That, that's part of your upbringing, part of the bubble. Okay. But the new theory, which I accept, is no, if you feel secure, if you were loved, if you were not abused or neglected, then when you're old enough, you will find the truth on your own. Okay. The people who are what I would say is blatantly, overtly, terroristically racist are the ones who have no self-esteem. They don't love themselves. They don't know who they are. They had such a traumatic childhood, most of them, that they became bullies, and they picked race was the easy one to bully people based on their race, because that's America. Racism is systemic in America. So anyway, I had a good, household and so forth. Italian families are warm, nurturing, extended, and so forth. That's part of the culture that they try to rob from us. Okay, and so uh, I was born into the '60s with extreme white privilege. Now I know this, um, and blue privilege because my father was a New York cop. Okay, and still to this day the blue wall exists. You know, you can get away with what, almost anything, literally murder, if you have blue privilege, because police won't arrest another cop's kid in those close knit city environments like New York. Okay, and the same as in every city. So I grew up with white privilege and a white feeling of supremacy. I'm on top of the world. I can do whatever I want and get away with it. I was the oldest, so I was spoiled. My mother was an only child, so my grandparents from Italy spoiled me. So I was, I had all this entitlement, still do, still working through it, but I was born into that. Plus, I had blue privilege. So at the young age of 14, I was inducted. I went to the police resort and was inducted into the drug dealing fraternity, international drug trafficking, that many cops' kids were the biggest drug dealers because they couldn't get busted. Just like today, by the way, the biggest drug dealers are not in the streets in the hood. The biggest drug dealers are in the white gated communities. And the police don't go after them because they're the politicians, kids, and the politicians themselves and elite corporate and so forth. Same hierarchy. So anyway, I was inducted into the drug dealing fraternity of policemen's kids, and from the commissioners on down were the biggest drug dealers. But I wasn't smart enough to just sell them. I used them because I'm an addict, I found out later, by nature. And so I became addicted to every drug there was at the time, including heroin. I was a junkie and so forth. But um, so if crack was around, I probably wouldn't be around now. Um, so at the same time, was adopted and I joined the
I'm
hippie
sorry, one
movement.
moment, Richard. I want to address something.
Okay.
Again, Richard gave a disclaimer at the top of the conversation. This is his perspective. So, sir, Saint Michael of Cigarillo, if you think that he is over exaggerating, that's your opinion. Again, that's your opinion, but this is his perspective. So from
Right.
where he's looking from, this is his experience, this is his perspective. So to state that you feel like he is over exaggerating, we will definitely want to tune in when you write your story, because I noticed a couple of quotes back, or a couple of comments back rather. You said that you grew up idolizing people like Barry Sanders and Michael Jordan. But I asked you, if you're talking honestly, were if you were you going to school, were you in communities with people that were Barry Sanders and Michael Jordan? So how did you revere those people? Don't I got a black friend me. Don't patronize me right here. And Coach Malik, always a pleasure to see you. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to see you in these conversations, because sis, you are fierce. Thank you so much. Thank you, Devon. Thank you for that. The moderating and getting in that room, because again, comments are appreciated. They are welcome. They are, feedback is absolutely what we're here for. But what we will not do is patronize anybody's. We're not going to patronize here, and we're not going to minimize anybody's experience. If this is what he's telling you, this happened, this is from his perspective. So let's be thoughtful, let's be mindful, and absolutely let's be open to receiving this. Okay. That
Thank you, Courtney.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
go back.
and that's part of the whole story. Is this is my authentic identity, my discovering mine. I can't tell you what your authentic identity is. That's up to you. All I can do is share and help guide. how I discovered my authentic identity. And so I became a drug addict, but I also joined the hippie movement, you know, because I again, you know, I was part of this whole milieu of questioning everything. I mean, I was blessed with some degree of brains. I was kind of a nerd in school, so I didn't just accept things. I checked things out and so forth. I questioned in the Catholic Church. I questioned the priest, which they was not allowed at the time. And so actually, my parents said, I'm too smart for my own good. That was a lot of parents said that because we were questioning right tradition. Okay. And so uh, that was and by the way, step back a little in elementary school, because I was somewhat of a nerd and because I kind of had an oversized nose, and there was always these ethnic jokes and things like that. I was bullied, probably not much more than anyone else. That I mean, those people that were bullied at the time, bullying is endemic in our society, not only in the schools, at all levels. We bully other countries, we bully people on the streets and so forth. But so I was bullied, and so looking back, that trauma, I always remembered those experiences of being bullied. So that trauma stayed with me, and is a reason why I don't tolerate bullying at any level. I'll stand up to police. I'll stand up to the president. I'll stand up to anybody because they're just humans like us, equal, one. Okay? You can't bully. You can't, you're not better than me. No one can bully and get away with it. That's why my nickname is Rich the Equalizer. I neutralize and equalize bullies, not violently, no, with words. But so anyway, back. So joined the hippies, protested the Vietnam War. Everybody who was conscious knew that it was wrong, knew that it was an unjust, illegal war, knew that killing whole villages of women and children with napalm and killing our own young people who were drafted, for what reason? So we could dominate one little piece of the world, and our ego, with China, that you're not going to win here. Same thing that we're doing now, and we've never learned from. So anyway, we knew that was wrong. We knew that what our parents were teaching us were wrong about other people, people of color. That they're not inferior. All these things were, all this learning was going on. But looking back, interesting thing, and I hope I don't piss off my old OG hippie friends, but being a hippie was an aspect of white privilege. Okay, that was because you know the black people black identified people who were in the struggle with us, the Black Panthers, Nation of Islam, all of that. They weren't hippies. They were there for life and death struggle. We were there for peace, love. Here's my shirt: peace, love, and unity. Get high, free sex. We were having a good time. Yeah, we were protesting. We were getting arrested along with them. But all this whole period, you know, I never had a black friend. I never had a friend of color. My whole adolescence, this whole catharsis, 60s and 70s, I was never, I mean, I dealt drugs with black people. I worked with black people because I was in the music business. I even went to parties with Jimi Hendrix at the time, had cocaine there. I mean, you can read about it in my book. The stories. Yes, it does sound, by the way, I agree with Saint Michael, or whatever, if that's his real name. It does sound like an exaggeration. Even reading my own stories, I did all of that. I mean, that was my constant, thing. I did all of this. It made me tired, made me feel like I could sit back now and relax. Well, we know we can't. But anyway, um, so being a hippie was an aspect of white privilege. It was safe. I mean, relatively safe for us. We marched on Washington. I was arrested, and so forth. Um, so this whole period, uh, to answer Devon's question, so They say in any addiction, and by the way, white supremacy is an addiction. Okay, if you're indoctrinated to something over and over again, it's habitual. It's an addiction. Okay, and so the first step of any addiction is admitting it, getting out of denial. That's the first step. You can't deal with any addiction if you don't do that. Period. Okay, and so um, I was an addict by nature. I'm definitely addicted not only to drugs but to this white privilege, this blue privilege. By the way, I got arrested during that period. Uh, I had blue privilege against with the New York cops and so forth, but not with the federal marshals. I sold heroin to undercover federal marshals and got charged with 9 felonies at the age of 19. Okay, facing 63 years in prison. You can read the whole story. Long story short, how much time do you think I did in prison? Okay. How much time? I had white privilege, blue privilege. My family had a little bit of money to bribe officials and bribe judges. How much time do you think the Italians, the mafia, we have connections. How much time do you think I did? Zero, zero time. If I was a person of color, I had got 5 years probation. That was cut in half, even. Okay. If I was a person of color, I would still be in prison right now. Okay. So when you talk about privilege, it's life and death. It's a life and death issue. Okay. Okay. It's not just, oh, nice. I have privilege. I get a good job. I can kick back a little bit more. I wouldn't be here, period, if I didn't have that privilege. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be able to share my story. I wouldn't be. Okay. So, but that was, so to answer Devon's question, yeah, we have to hit, for white supremacy to be overcome, okay, we have to hit our bottom, just like any addiction. You have to hit your bottom, okay? My bottom, over and over again, I've been constantly hitting bottoms because I'm still not out of it. I'm still indoctrinated. So I have to constantly hit bottom, be humbled, and realize, okay, I'm not above. Okay, I'm one. And that's a lifelong process. But I'm grateful to God, universe, whatever, all of these experiences I went through to humble myself so that I can be one. And a big part of that has been listening. Okay, remember I told you I didn't have any black friends. Finally, in the when I in the 70s, when I became in my 20s, through I got out of drugs through a spiritual search. That's another whole story. Went halfway around the world. I funded my spiritual search doing international drug deals. Total hypocrisy. But I studied all the different religions and ended up with Baha'i, which was a unity of all the religions. But the other teaching of Baha'i was the oneness of black and white, the oneness of the races, so-called races, because that's an invented term. And so I was forced through the Baha'i meetings. They were the first ones to have integrated meetings in the South, by the way. Okay, the first religion, black and white. The KKK used to break them up. But up north, I went to meetings with diverse, people, and became actual friends. And I actually dated my first African American woman, and so forth. And so I started to, I still had this attitude that I'm better because that's not gonna. I'm in my 20s. But the people of color that I met along the way that were put in my path that I had developed friendships with, whether in Baha'i or in activism, in Nation of Islam, in the Black Panthers, everywhere I went, they were patient with me because they recognized I was going through my recovery from white supremacism. Okay? They were willing to work with the willing. They realized some sincerity that I had because I had hit my bottom. I could only go up now. Once you're an addict, I actually used to wake up on the street in New York in Times Square. I'd wake up sleeping on the street. Okay. Uh, you can't get much lower than that. Okay. So people recognize it. I still had my, stupid white, even to this day, I'll make jokes that are racist with my own family who's black, mixed, you know what I'm saying? Okay. But they're patient with me because they know, oh man, he's learning. He's still in this process of learning. We'll teach him. So I was willing to become a student of mentors throughout my life, and and I'm still that way. I have mentors in their 80s, 90s who were in the civil rights movement, who were with Dr. King, who have done the work, um, and so that to me is what allyship is all about. Okay. So, and listen, I can keep talking. So anybody feel free to interrupt with any questions and comments. So the 70s came and went, that catharsis. Um, and the next big awakening or awakening. So the 70s came, then my spiritual path and search and enlightenment through Baha'i, which, by the way, enabled me to learn. I read the Quran, Bhagavad Gita, the scriptures of all religions. I went and practiced in their temples, not only in this country. So I always believed in experiential learning. And the beauty of those days was because of it was like a love, peace, and unity environment. You could hitchhike. I hitchhiked this whole country. I hitchhiked Europe, and so forth, and very little money. That's part of the hippie things of being detached, a minimalist, and so I was able to experience a lot of things. Again, the stories are all in the book, um, and so I found what I believed was the most universal faith community and joined it. And then through that, I started to learn about oneness and teach oneness. But I still believed, then I believed, guess what? We were post racial, that racism was over. Because in my mind now it was over, right? This is my personal journey. For me, it's beginning. I'm getting out of my bubble of white supremacism, and now I'm going through my catharsis. So naturally, we want to extend that to everybody. Oh, what man? Now we're all, peace, love, and unity. There's no more racism just because we say it is. you know, we're colorblind, all this thing. So I was still naive, you know. Um, Racially speaking or diversity speaking. Uh, so the next trauma, and these are both traumas and opportunities. All traumas are opportunities. Some traumas we choose, like I chose to use drugs. Nobody forced me to do that, right? Um, and some are chosen for us just by our environment and so forth. A good mentor and friend of mine, J. Richard Hoff, who was an international motivational speaker, he said, Rich, if you stop making mistakes, you're dead. You need, that's when you die, because because that's a lie anyway, because you can't stop making mistakes. Okay. So there's a difference between striving for perfection and excellence. If you're striving for perfection, you have to cover up your mistakes because you got to be perfect. Okay. But if you're striving for excellence, you embrace your errors, your mistakes, your traumas, and you use them to go to the next level. You acknowledge it. And so I learned that from him. But anyway, um, so the next step was I was invited to the Caribbean. I was invited to leave America and go overseas. The Baha'is in the Caribbean invited me down, partly a mission trip, but I was an entrepreneur by this time. Remember, I used to be a drug dealer. I transferred those skills into into legitimate business, and I was also a therapist and counselor, starting drug treatment programs. I did it in New York. I did in other countries, in other states. I opened up crisis centers, 24-hour help centers, storefront centers, because I loved being on the street when I was a drug dealer and all that. So I just transferred that stuff. So I got invited to go to the Caribbean This was in 1980. So I'm getting into the 80s now. And I went, I was engaged actually to a black woman in Tuskegee, Alabama. The joke is, and I hope I'm not being one of my insensitive racist jokes here, but when they say once you go black, you don't go back, that has been my story in terms of relationships, and there's a reason for that. And I'm not putting down white identified women or white identified people at all, because we're all, at different levels of our growth and development. But to me, our people of African descent, black, African American, whatever title you give them, have an inherent strength that I'm attracted to. The woman, especially, okay, that descended from the African queens. That's genetic, number one, if you know your culture, which I've learned. Because remember, my kids are now black, identified black, because my wife is black. Okay, so I had to learn culture as well. Okay, and also through struggle and trauma and oppression, that builds strength. I mean, it's not something you choose, but again, it's a trauma that builds strength. But when you're white privilege, things are served to you on a platter, you get weak. You become the weaker race or the weaker gender. Men are the weaker gender. Why? Because we've been fed the BS, the false identity that we're above, superior, that we're the strongest one. So we never had to find our authentic self. you know, so that's what this whole thing is. Once you find your authentic identity, you can relax. I mean, it's much easier being equal than being superior. Okay, when you're superior, you're not, first of all, that's a lie. So you have to pretend. It's a whole life of pretending. That's what America really, to me, America is the biggest pretender in the world. We pretend we're exceptional, we're the best, all of this. When, we're good, we're great. But so is, Mozambique. So is, St. Vincent. So is France. So is China. They have their good greatness and they have their bad things, that they're working through as well. Just like people, the same thing. So, you know, it's such a relief when you can just be yourself, not be superior because you're a man or because you're white or because you're a Christian, which is a joke because Christ would turn over in his, well, he's not in the grave, he's in heaven according to the belief. But, you know, he wouldn't recognize Christians who go around saying they're superior than other religions, you know. So anyway, so I got invited to go to the Caribbean, and I fell in love with the. I was engaged, like I said, but we were not getting consent from our parents to get married, and so we agreed to separate. My fiance, and she said, "You have an opportunity to go to the Caribbean. Go ahead, check it out." And so, one thing I learned in life: if a door opens and you think it might be the universe, God, whatever, nature, whatever you believe in as your higher power, try to step, even if it's a little scary, put one foot through it, even or one hand through it, because it might be your opening to your next level, to where you're supposed to be. Okay. But if you don't, that door might close forever. They might not open again. That's one thing I learned. And it's called The Power of Attraction. There's a great movie and book called The Secret. There's a chapter in my book about that, about the power of attraction, that what uh, and manifestation. Uh, so, and I realized later on I've been using that and following that unconsciously before I knew about it. Okay. And people had been helping me. So I was invited to the Caribbean in the 80s, and I went. And I don't know if any of you can sing the Disney song, It's a Whole New World. It's a whole new world. you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like, uh, the band's playing, the orchestra. It's a whole new life. You step out of this country. I had traveled before. I had hitchhiked around Europe. I had even been to the islands on a cruise, but I was a tourist. I didn't get to know the people. You know what I'm saying? I was in my bubble. White supremacists, American supremacists. We have three supremacies here: racial, national, American, and religious, Christian supremacy. Those are the three to my triple evils. Okay, okay. But this time now, I got to just hang out with the people. I was going to really just relax and learn. I was at a more mature stage, and I mean, everything opened up. Long story short, I mean, I realized how little I knew about the world. As woke as I was as an American, and that's why I've now formed the Global Woke Institute. The wokest Americans about our social injustices, about what's going on here in America, racism, poverty, all of this, we know very little about what's going on outside of our borders. When we say Black Lives Matter here, and believe me, I'm not putting down those of you who are globally woke. Many of you do know about the African diaspora and so forth. But I'm saying generally, when we say Black Lives Matter, we're saying Black American lives matter because we don't really have a clue about Black African lives, Black Caribbean lives, what they're going through, and the fact that what we buy here, what we spend our money on, what we do here, how we pollute, how we waste affects them directly. You know, they're having droughts because of what we're doing in America, our luxuries and so forth. So that's another whole thing. But it took me 2 years in living in the islands in the Caribbean, first St. Lucia, then St. Vincent, and marrying into it. I married, I met my wife there, my current wife of 41 years now, there. Um, for me to finally shed my ugly Americanism, my American supremacy, and start to look at the world through the eyes of other people, okay, not Americans. Um, and that was just a total catharsis. I came back to this country 6 years later with a wife and three kids. Again, addict. We have eight now, but but I was Robin Hood. I said, how could America force these people their currency to be one third of ours? Are they one third human beings? So they have to pay three times. Plus, their American companies go down there and pay them way less to begin with. So that even further suppresses their economy. You know, I mean, it just woke. I got so awakened to what our American capitalistic economic colonial system does around the world. And I was Robin Hood. When I moved back in the late 80s, early 90s, I decided I was going to rob from the rich America and give to the poor the rest of the world. And I literally, I told the people I owed, my creditors, loans I had, whatever, student loans. I said I will pay, but I'm paying in their currency. I'm equalizing it here. If you don't accept their currency, I'm just not paying what I owe. It's simple. Okay, they thought I was crazy, and they canceled my debts. Most of them. Again, white privilege. But even when my fifth child was born, and insurance didn't pay for it or whatever, I just told the hospital, listen, I'm not paying the bill. I'll return the merchandise. And they said, forget about it. You don't owe us anything. But seriously, I mean, I became Robin Hood. And I am to this day trying to equalize the world. So the 90s was spent mainly traveling around in this country, growing my family, traveling around in black townships, I would call them, because many of the towns I went into in Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, Oklahoma were just like South Africa, townships, apartheid, plantation system. This is in the 90s. This is not a far back. This is the 90s. Most of you have been born then and lived then. And so traveling and teaching oneness through the Baha'i, teaching social and economic development, Dr. King's methods, and so forth, and learning, listening and learning. And bringing my family with me and my kids with me and my Caribbean black wife with me because remember, she's coming from a different culture than black Americans. Okay. Black Africans and black West Indians have had self rule for decades. Black Americans have never had self rule. So it's a culture clash there. Okay. And so I learned about that, all of that, you know. And so that was the 90s. But I'm still in my bubble. I'm still in my bubble of where we've made it. We're post-racial. Even seeing all of this because I was post-racial. You know what I'm saying? Because I still didn't see the systemic nature of racism. You know, there were bad cops, there was some bad politicians, racists, there's a KKK, you know, all of this. But I'm still American. You know, I'm still white, identified. I'm still in that bubble. And it took the new the new millennium and the millennials and, you know, cell phone cameras, you know, in this, since our new century, for me to finally emerge from that bubble and realize the systemic nature. No, this is not a few bad apples in the police department. This is the police department. This is the system. This is how we've always done. The police started as fugitive slave chasers. Then they became union busters. And then their job was to control the people based on class, color, and so forth to keep them in their place and not disrupting this economic capitalist system of the elite, the 1%. I mean, it was all the millennials were I was waiting again for the 70s. I was waiting for the rebirth of the hippies, the Black Panthers, and all of them. And that happened in 2000 in this century. It happened for a couple of reasons. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I love this. I love this segment of the conversation because, Richard, if you will, and we want to also welcome Guy to the room. Always, Guy, with being able to really pinpoint some very constructive comments in regards to these race relation conversations. But as Guy said, you know, white people don't have to marry or white identified, but he's from his perspective, white people don't have to marry and have kids by black folks to have some soft spot for black people. They can marry their own and be pro reparations for the ascendants for enslaved Africans. And I absolutely 100% agree with that. But I was, you know, sparked or inspired to just break up a little bit of the momentum, if you will, just to share that that's the part. This is the part that I think is the most instrumental or influential, I'm hoping, to people that tune into this conversation or this discussion, rather, is the speaking of the systemic racism practices. So people have got to understand that no, you yourself may not have, you know, uh, again, you know, participated in lynching and, you know, hurting physically or any other part of a, you know, what that would entail, a black person. But if you don't tell on your friend that you know who did it, that is you being a part. If you sat idly by while a teacher reprimanded a fellow student who was African American for something that you know you yourself do all the time, you are aiding in it. And so I think that this is the part of the conversation that, you know, a lot of um, liberal, I dare say liberal, start to tune out. You know, what's that meme? I can't see, I'm blind. What are you talking about? You know,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
uh, uh, you know, this is when they start to look away. because
Hmm.
this attacks people at home. It attacks you in your own personal, because it's easy to vilify. It's easy to, like I said at the top of the conversation, it's easy to say, "Oh, Adolf Hitler was a maniac." It's not easy to say, "Okay, my you know, I, Hitler got his gameplay, or his game plan from what was happening here in America." Like
Hmm.
literally.
Hmm. That's
Instead,
right.
this
That's
is how we handle this situation. We're gonna do to them. We're gonna do to them what they do to them, and we're gonna mirror it, and we're was able to gain, literally national traction because of what he was able to do in his small. And again, I'm going off on my tangent because read a couple of our autobiographies. Like I said, it's easy for us to vilify and say, okay, well, Charles Manson is this and that because you have never participated. It's easy to say, oh, Strom Thurmond. It's easy to say Donald Trump. Dare say it. It's easy to say this, but it's hard to say, okay, what has Joe Biden done? Okay, it's hard to say, okay, well, what has Kamala Harris done? It's hard to say, okay, well, what am I doing because I'm a part of this party? So having the conversation about systemic racism, and that this is not our grandfather's, perspective, but this is the here and now. And
Mhm.
I welcome more conversation in regards to that. You all, we are coming we have passed our hour mark. And so traditionally, this is the time when we're doing feedback where the link has been dropped. If anybody wants to come up and have actually a question, or have some interaction with Richard directly, that is definitely welcome. The link has been dropped. I'll put it again because we're past our first hour, we're heading into our second hour. And again, we this is the this is we here in our glower, room, and in our chats, this is not just a speech, this is not just a presentation. This is an interaction. This is an invitation. This is a discussion. And so again, the link is dropped. If anyone wants to come up and share, and we are literally change is happening just by us proposing and engaging in this type of conversation, because we are not shying away. Again, as I said in the top of the hour, as I said in the top of the discussion, rather, we are not we're there are going to be points of uncomfortable situations, but we are not going to shy away from it. Okay. We do
Thank you.
have someone coming up to the stage to pose a question, and we definitely welcome the interaction. All right, one moment. And hey,
Hey Omega,
welcome. Where are you calling?
it's
Where are you
me.
tuning in from?
It's me, Abel Garcia from California. I sue. Long time. I
Oh,
haven't
you're
been here
still
in
in
your show
California,
for a while.
Jose?
Yep,
You sure
but
haven't. How are you? How is
I'm alright.
California? I'm surprised you're
Yeah,
still there. And
I'm
you're
still
there.
keeping
I'm
track of
still
you.
waiting for that picture of your awesome. Are you still growing your beard?
Yeah, but I had a question for your
Are
guest.
you still growing your beard? I need to get that picture.
Yes, yes,
Okay, go ahead.
but
Go ahead. His name is Richard Pellegrino. Richard, this is a long time supporter of the show. This is Jose Garcia from California. I'm going to go on mute. Go ahead, Jose.
hi Richard.
Hi, Jose.
Uh, I was just gonna ask you because I heard you say earlier about how you want the country to keep on going in a progressive way, which means pretty much I think you're talking about Biden or something. But uh, what do you think? Because I don't know, man. The economy is not too good right now, and with all these wars, do you still support this guy? You think he's a progressive? With all these wars in the Middle East and Ukraine, you think he's for peace?
Great question. Great question, Jose. um, uh, you know, I have a long answer, but I'm trying to get a short answer. And the long answer will come as I discuss more about this century, okay? Because it's all has to, everything is connected. What's happened in this century, okay? All of these changes that are taking place. By the way, I'm not a Democrat, Republican. I'm totally independent. I vote for a person. Uh, I understand that our system, our political system, is totally not. I won't say totally. It's very corrupt. It's a pay-to-play system that our elected leaders, from the president on down, do not have the power. They have some power to influence change, but they are controlled. Barack Obama told us this, that he was naive when he thought he could make all the changes that he promised. And by the way, he's still influencing by his new movie company, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the people who have the power, we are the people. And I'm not saying because we're the people and because it's a democracy. It's not a democracy. It's a plutocracy and oligarchy that's controlled by corporate America, by the military industrial complex. So um, we have to look at the big picture. That's part of our indoctrination, is just to be divided by political party, to be divided by race. That's how they distract us, but divided by immigrants and non-immigrants and so forth. And so uh, you're right, and you kind of stolen my thunder for my conclusion, is that we are living right now, 2024, in, to me, the most momentous time in my history, in the history since I've been alive in this country, and that means everybody else on this show, because I think I'm probably the oldest or among the oldest, um, because of what you just pointed out. The economy, I mean, the economy has always been up and down, up and down. It's just, that's just used as a political tool. But what's significant is, you're right, we are funding two wars in Ukraine and a genocide in Israel, okay, when we cannot afford to house our people, to feed our people, to take care of basic needs of our own people and other people around the world. 3% of our military budget would feed the whole world, would end hunger. I mean, so we have to look at the big, this is the systemic nature of what Courtney was talking about, what I was talking about racism. Remember Dr. King's triple evils? Racism, poverty, and militarism. They all three go hand in hand. Okay. And so Biden is a puppet. He's old school. He's America first. He believes in American exceptionalism. But when you only have two choices, you only have two choices. Okay. We're not a parliamentary system like in some countries, like in my wife's country, like in England, where you can change your leaders anytime and you have different choices and so forth. We only have two choices here, so you have to choose the lesser of two evils. And the Democrats, and listen, I have close Republican friends, very close, and they might even be on this show. Okay, I'm talking about as parties. The Republicans can only get votes by hating on certain groups: immigrants, Muslims, blacks, poor blacks, and so forth. That's the only way they get votes. The Democrats, at least they do not use hate of groups, fear mongering in groups to get in office. That's the difference. That's a major difference there. But I don't want to
And
get
I'm
into.
gonna I'm gonna have to say something real quick because you say you're independent, but you're
Yes,
still promoting a Democrat, Biden, and all that he's doing. How come I'm an independent too, and
Mhm.
how come you don't vote for because Kennedy is gonna run on the independent he's gonna be running the independent as an independent candidate. How come you don't vote for him instead of voting for Biden or something like that? And
because,
I'm gonna leave it at that, Omega. I'm gonna log off and I'll listen to your comment.
thank you,
Thank
Jose.
you.
Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. And you're right. I mean, there's great independent candidates, but the reality of America, just like the reality right now, is I'm not white, but I'm white identified, so I have to deal with that reality and that privilege. The reality is there's only two parties. There's only two chances to win. Okay, and that's a reality. So if I vote for a third party candidate, that is giving to me the greater of the two evils the chance to win. That's just my take on that. But I'm not telling anybody else what to vote. Some of my kids are going to vote for third party candidates because of their principles. That's great. Okay. But I want to go back to and by the way, Jose, I'm really happy that you chimed in with those questions because they're very timely. And but I wanted to answer. Was it Guy as well? Guy who said, "Yeah, you don't have to marry a black person to, you know, to have this catharsis." Exactly right. That's a very profound point. Okay, this is my experience. I'm sharing. I maybe I needed to because I'm so thick. Who knows? But the fact is, what you do have to have is a black friend or black friends or friends of color. Okay, otherwise it's an intellectual liberal exercise. If you haven't sat in the kitchen table, if you haven't listened and listened to, and when I say friend, I mean you listen to each other and learn from each other. That's the only way a white identified person can really have that heart, to sacrifice. By the way, and again, I'm not putting down my white identified friends, those who are in the movement at any level, those who just contribute money to bail out people, whatever they do is great. Everybody's got to do. My motto is if you can't do the greatest good, do the least harm, whatever you can do. Okay. But Dr. King said the most dangerous, who's the most dangerous group of people? Not the KKK, okay, not the Nazis and all. He said the moderate whites, okay, which is my definition of moderate white, liberal white, whatever. Why? Because we can talk a great talk and stand up for you and say we're going to, oh, all of this is true. But when, part of my French, when the shit hits the fan, we'll be the first to retreat back into our privilege and our comfort, because nobody likes to take the bullets. I mean, everybody's concerned about self preservation. That's a reality. Okay. So when they ask a whole room of white, what's the lady who asked a whole room of white people, how many of you wish you were born black? What's her name? I forget.
Her
But she
name is
goes around
Jane
doing work.
Elliott. And
Jane Elliott.
also the one, yeah, that we were talking about the last show that ended up being picked up by another commentator. And
Hmm.
but Jane Elliott, yeah, so someone who really understands and appreciates the severity of the oppression and the vilification of black people, also does not support reparations for black people unless uh, indigenous people get it first. And like I
Right.
said, this welcomes a whole nother caveat of discussion.
Yep.
Devon
Yep.
had a comment here. Do you think the average white person could really truly be a friend to the black? Average white person. I'm talking about without the wokeness, without the perspective of privilege that I think is necessary for white people to understand that they have. But that is the question there as well. So when you want to
Yeah.
address that, that's great.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for me to define average, but I guess you defined it. And you're right. I mean, no, I don't think that it's possible at all. Look at all the. Again, I'm speaking from my perspective. Look at all I've gone through, and I'm still not 100% woke because I don't have a daily. My daily experience is completely different from my own kids' daily experience. And there's two different Americas, completely two different worlds. So yeah, that it we have to constantly work at it. Okay, and part of that, it's not like a burden. It's fun, it's loving, it's spiritual work. I'm saying, you know, this is what I tell. Uh, I tell my white friends who are scared, really, of interacting and saying, "Oh man, when we become the minority and blacks get in power, they're going to treat us like we treated them." And I said, no, no. I've been around black people for what now, 50 years. I mean, around in terms of being friends, being intimate, and so forth, right? And they're still, after 50 years, patient with me, okay? Because again, this is my own personal bias and my own perspective, is that when you've been oppressed, when you've relied on spiritual power, when you've relied on your higher power for so long, you've developed a spiritual strength, which forgiveness is a big part of it, is a big part of spiritual strength. And I find people of color, period, to be, and especially black period, to be very forgiving and tolerant and patient. you know, uh, I'm not saying that they should be. I'm just saying that's what my experience is. So it's a very loving. I definitely feel way more comfortable in the black community than I do in the white community. you know,
To your point with that though, this is a whole nother, because we have another commenter, we have another supporter and a friend and colleague coming at the stage, Guy Nollywood. But I just want to say to your statement with that, that I think that forgiveness in a lot lot of our communities is forced. It's
oh yeah,
forced forgiveness, because it's hard to
definitely.
stay mad at the same person that's cutting your checks. It's hard to stay mad at the same, it's hard to be, as we both know right now, it's hard to be mad, or it's hard to be vocal against a system that is routinely oppressing you, when that same system is the provider of your housing. you know Monica Delancey, particularly, I'm so upset with what's going on with her retaliatory eviction situation right now. And also, when you've experienced it, you understand the sheer the sheer power that society has. So what kind of what sense is it going to be with you being mad at it? You're going to have to forgive, in a whole lot of situations, forget. I mean, I'm just thinking of the way, the weight and the way that so many of us are literally um commanded to just not talk about it. And we know that if this situation had happened to your family, your descendants, your daughter, your son, you absolutely would make sure that holy hell terror came down on this entire community.
Right.
So a lot of that forgiveness is forced,
I
that's the
agree.
reality of it. But Guy Nollywood, welcome to the Meet the Author and the Be Black chat today. Go ahead, you have the stage with Richard Pellegrino, author of I Am Not White.
Thank you, Sister Courtney. It's a pleasure being on your platform. Hello, Richard. How you doing?
Good
How's
guy.
everything?
Good, great.
That's good. That's good. I do have a question for you. Um, I've been um, really, really in the struggle as far as liberating my people, as African people. I am a Pan African. Pan African means African of abroad. Um, so we have, I believe in unity among African people. I don't believe in unifying with other races of people. I'm not a multicultural person. However, I do respect people. Um, it doesn't mean I hate anybody. It's just that it's a respect. I
Mhm.
just feel like, and I hear you. You said that you're still learning and that it's good to have black friends and stuff like that, but I don't think um it's hard for me to grasp that, because for doing, slavery and Jim Crow, there's been this, that created self-hate among our people. It created division among our people, and being me, I'm trying to unify with not just black people in the United States, but black people in on the continent and in the Caribbeans.
Mm-hmm.
That's my focus. I believe black people should marry black people
Mm-hmm.
because what we went through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's how we can stay in the game, because we are in a race, and it is, like I said, this is competition, and we
Mm-hmm.
have to be realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and interracial marriages has not and will not solve the race problem.
Mm-hmm.
So my question I'm asking you,
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming you are European. When I look at you are European.
Mm-hmm.
How are you um, fixing the or make it better, or trying to dissolve the institutional racism as a white man? um how are you fixing, because that's the problem, the institutional racism that's
Right.
always been the number one problem. So
Exactly.
my question is, how are you trying to dissolve that?
Great question, Guy. Thank you. Um, and I was going to get into it when I talked about this century, but you guys, you gave me a great segue. So, uh, once in this new millennium, once I got over my post-racial attitude, because you're right, for me, it I'm not in the struggle. I'm living in this world of privilege, and part of that privilege was even to think that it was post-racial, you know, and so the new millennium awakened me to the fact that no, I can't just teach spiritual oneness, peace, love, and unity, that we're all one now, you know, and uh, and that black people shouldn't uh, deal with the past, deal with reparations, that, in other words, I was in the equality movement for a while rather than the equity movement. Okay, it's okay to say, oh, now we're all equal, and put the past in the past. No, first you have to have equity, what you're talking about, where the reparations, where the balance, the bootstraps are equal now. Okay, Dr. King said it. So in this, you know, so the Black Lives Matter movement, I became re-involved with the new Black Panther movement, with the Black Nationalist movement, with the Back to Africa movement. Ever since 2000, and then I started to understand. And then, of course, we saw play out on our phones, everything, all the police brutality, which is none of that was new. It just became news in this new millennium because we had surveillance. We had the people's surveillance. Okay. After 9/11, the government started surveilling us more, but we started surveilling the government and started surveilling the police and the institutions. When I say we, and all people of goodwill, all people who were somewhat awake and awoken. And so that's when I said, no, I have to, yeah, I'm still going to teach through Baha'i, those people who are on a spiritual path, but we have to bring this together with the reality of systemic racism in our society, that until we get rid of those triple evils of racism, poverty, and militarism, that's systemic racism. Every institution, there's no institution in this society that has not benefited materially, financially from slavery and Jim Crow, that has not benefited. And so, yeah, we need a great equalizer, equitabilizing, if you want to say. And so I've joined all those movements. The funny thing is, though, Guy, is that because I'm white, identified, I was rejected by all the black nationalist movements. We don't want any white people. Why? I know why. White people come in and take over, tell us what to do. I mean, that's the reality. I'm strongly opinionated. I'm not afraid to talk. But see, in the Baha'i community, by the way, the Baha'i teaching is somewhat diametrically opposed to what you're teaching. What you're saying, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that the Baha'i teaching is we're now at the stage of unity in diversity. We've reached the stage worldwide, not America, as human beings, where we can be one, where we need unity and diversity. In other words, we need that. However, it also states that it's the time for the people of color, especially black Africans in America, and native indigenous people to rule the world. Okay? It's time for them to rule the world. People that look like me have been ruling it. Look the mess. Look at what's happened, okay, for so long. Okay? So in the Baha'i scriptures, it says that the black race is like the pupil of the eye through which the light shines through to illuminate all of humanity. There's so much teachings in how the African, and see, the Bible says it too, the last will be first. All of this is predicting now, and all the Native American and indigenous prophecies talk about the warriors of the rainbow, a time where we'll all come together. But the idea is the Europeans are not going to be on the top. As a matter of fact, our role is to be underneath and to serve. Servitude, okay? Voluntary servitude, not involuntary servitude, okay? That's the highest station. So my job is to serve your mission, okay, of strengthening black, remember, authentic identity. Authentic people search for their authentic identity. For people of color, that is what you're doing. You're teaching, you know, the diaspora, African, culture and so forth. My kids are learning that too. They traveled. They're traveling to their roots, to learn that. Okay, and then uniting. We have to figure a way to work together and a role. You, I'm just saying this. I'm not trying to be confrontational. You have to find a role for people like me, and you have to tell us what that role is, and then we have to do it. You know what I'm saying? Okay, that I've been offering, and I'm doing it. I mean, I do whatever I can. I'm a member of NAACP, SCLC, Black Lives Matter, Surge, every group, and I'm out there doing whatever they tell me they want me to do, to use my white face and white privilege to, to open up doors, whatever I need to do to use that. And backing up again, what I found personally, and I like to hang out more. I said I'm more comfortable personally in the black community than I am in any other community. I've learned now the Hispanic community. I'm learning to get comfortable in the Hispanic community. But there's a thing in the black community called the hookup mentality. By the way, they didn't invent it. Every culture, the Italians have the hookup mentality. Every culture has that. It means that because you're one of us, because you're like me, I can take you for granted. You should just give me everything free. You should, I mean, we can take advantage of each other. That's the negative part of the hookup mentality. And so that happens within any insular group, whether you're all black, all white, all Latino, all Native American. So the mixture, when we work together, we get rid of that. We don't take each other for granted. We learn to respect each other's culture, the strengths of it, and build on that. So that's the Baha'i teaching. And I'm with you. I know I've fought, believe me, I fought in a lot of organizations. I fought down white identified people who think they can become white saviors and take over the organization and tell black people how they have to help themselves, help or other people of color. That's just part of our whole supremacy thing. And if I was black identified, I know because of my radical nature, I would be in your organization. I wouldn't be uniting with white people personally. You know what I'm saying? But the teaching that I believe in is that we have to learn how to do that. So
Yeah. Thank you. I just want to just y'all hear me?
yeah, I hear.
Okay. Yeah, I never seen white people because I know, like I said, I love my ancestors. I know me and Courtney, we definitely honor Malcolm X as well as Dr. King.
Yes,
Those are uh, great, powerful men. I'll represent Marcus Messiah Garvey. He was the first teacher of mine.
yes.
Um, and then it was Malcolm, and then King. So, and all three of them basically tell us to do for self.
Hmm.
Um, but Malcolm said one thing that stood out. He said if white people want to help, um, they can't join us, but they can get together and help us by white people coming together and supporting us
Hmm.
separately.
Hmm.
But I never seen white people organize and say, look, this is to help to say, look, we're gonna use our privilege to to uplift the Africans in Americas. I never seen that. I never seen white people come together and say, look, let's let's try to take this money. Let's have a collection where we can uh, support and build more black-owned businesses.
Hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I
Because look,
definitely.
let's be realistic. We support white businesses every day.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. And
Okay.
let's keep in touch because I can connect you with white groups that are doing that and they're trying to find
Okay.
ways. Like I said, you have to instruct us. And if you stay separate from us, you can't tell us what to do. So we need to be guided, on how to actually help because a lot of white people think they're helping and they're not. But that's it. And also, I will say, I have to say, I revere Malcolm and Marcus Garvey and all of the revolutionary leaders. But Malcolm, at the end of his life, when he traveled to Mecca, uh, he went through a catharsis when he saw Muslims of all different colors and came back with the very Baha'i attitude that now we do have to figure out a way how to work with all the races, and but he didn't have much time to preach that because he was cut down. I don't know if that was a reason why it was cut down. Who knows? But I mean, I have my own theories.
Oh,
And but
absolutely. I think that that was, and I was going to actually say that to that point as well, that that was something that when he came back from his Mecca with the press conference, because I always say, this is something I would not have trusted that he had said or be attributing it to him saying it had I not had seen it said from his own mouth. But he did say that was one of the things that he had never embraced the idea of, but he now uh I don't know if the term was regretted, but he did say he was not he totally missed an opportunity when he was asked this question. And I believe that was at Harvard when he was speaking at Harvard. He was asked that question by someone in the audience. In the movie, they depicted it as him going into the institution, and it was asked to him on the steps. But the actual question was asked to him
mhm,
after he had actually spoken at Harvard, and it was asked then from one of the students, what can they do to help Black people? And he said, or what can they do to join Black people? That's what it was. Like, yeah, exactly. And when he came back from Mecca, he said that he thought that he had time now to see, or he had a different perspective, and that was something that was he realized that he had missed an opportunity there.
mhm, mhm,
And I agree. I think that there are groups that say, hey, this is what we're doing. There's actually a group here in Athens that is what their initiative is that they're organizing monies for the and I say personal reparations, but it is a community that was uprooted, that was destroyed in order to continue to build out University of Georgia. And I believe they're called the Reparations Coalition. So it's like ARC, and the group that they fundraise for is Linen Town. And so and we absolutely, because we're closing out the show soon, but we would love to get Richard back here in Athens, his return to Athens, and we are, trying to work with that group as well, for being a part of the discussion, the dine and discussion event that we are scheduling for our Black History I don't like to say month, but our Black History opportunity coming up.
Mhm.
Because really we're Black History every day. But thank you so much, Guy, because always, like I said, we have gone back about 15 years now,
Yeah.
have always been absolutely constructive and thought provoking
Hmm.
conversations, thought provoking contributions to the
Mhm.
conversation of race relations and progressive development within our community culture and diaspora. So absolutely, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
this
you,
Sunday.
and thank you, Richard. Man, it's nice meeting you.
You too. Likewise, brother.
All
All
right, see you,
right.
Courtney.
So thank you so much, Guy. So we are closing out because we are coming down to our last 10 minutes. The link, it was dropped, you all, but since we're coming down to our last 10 minutes, we're going to let Richard be not only the equalizer but also the closer of the of the feedback and the discussion. And so we do want to give him that time. We want to give him that time exclusively. But I do welcome everyone that wants to keep this conversation going or be a part of this movement, the developments. Uh, Please subscribe to the newsletter, p4r.today. Join the village, because again, these village chats, this village building is not just something we do once a month or a couple of times a year. We literally are doing this every week. We are doing this every week, and we are not a group that just meets to meet. We are a group that meets to move. We are literally taking these conversations and these discussions and putting them into action. And so please join that. And then also we want to make sure, as Richard said, stay connected, get the book, read the book, understand and get engaged, because it offers some type of insight as well as can be inspiration for how um, a journey can shift, and how this can also shift your perspective, your thinking, and then also to just provide, like I said, again, some insight to influence. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining us this Sunday afternoon. And if you were watching the playback, whenever you were watching it, thank you for tuning in. And without any further ado, I'm going to let you go ahead and do the honors of the engagement and closing us out, Richard. Thank you again.
Thanks very much, Courtney, and everyone. Yeah, you can subscribe to the Global Woke Institute also at our website, www.howwokeami.org. Um, and if you want to continue, also we have a YouTube channel for the Global Woke Institute, where these videos and others will be posted as well, and Instagram and Facebook pages and so forth. And so, let's keep this thing going. What I want to wrap it up is what I started this last chapter of the book, which is this century, 2000 to really two chapters to 2023 or 22. This is really life-changing time. This is epic changing time. And right now, what's happening in the world because of the genocide, and it is genocide, and thank you, South Africa, for taking the lead in the world, together with some other African countries at the United Nations, to call it what it is: apartheid and genocide, what's taking place in Israel, backed by the US and European allies. So it's a replay of colonial settlerism settler colonialism. Sorry, um, and but it's awakened so much. I mean, so many people are asking questions all over social media, all over the world. This is a window of opportunity. Why is this happening? Why are we backing genocide? Okay, and it all points back to the fact that we still haven't resolved our trauma, our American trauma, our identity. We don't know who we are as a country. We're not warmongers. That's not us. You know, we're not genocidal. That's not us. That's not our authentic reality. Okay, we're the most diverse country in the world. That's by design, I guess, of the universe or your higher power, God. How did we become the most diverse country in the world with every culture and every race, so-called race, here? Okay, that's our strength. That is our strength, and so that's our exceptionalism. Not our economy, not capitalism, and so forth. So we need to question that. We need to question our personal, of course, authentic identity always, but our national authentic identity, who we are. And my proposal that I put out to you is in that process, we haven't resolved yet. We haven't admitted to racism. We haven't admitted to our triple evils. That's why we don't have our authentic identity. Until we resolve our own issues at home with the triple evils of racism, poverty, and militarism, we can't. We make a mess in the world everywhere we go. We obliterate. We total harm. We cause total harm. Yeah, we do some good. Oh, there's some humanitarian aid. There's some good, but it's all erased by the harm that we do. The collateral damage. We've killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people in this millennial, this new century, okay, around the world as collateral damage. So anyway, we have to focus on getting our authentic identity back, okay, or what it is for maybe for the first time, like I said. uh, and so that's what our focus needs to be, and talk about it together, consult within our organizations. Reparations for blacks is part of that reconciliation. That's part of our atonement, which the word atonement means at one mint, to become one again with ourselves, within ourselves. And the Baha'i teaching is, as I said, that it's time for the people of color, black, Africans, indigenous people, to become the rulers, to become, and for others, us to serve. Okay. I'll give a quick plug for this book, The Sovereign Psyche. To develop their sovereign psyche, which means that they are rulers. All of us have to develop this, but especially uh, people, BIPOC, blacks, indigenous people of color, okay? Because they need to take their rightful place as a leaders, spiritual leaders, not oppressors, not leaders in the form of how the Europeans have learned to do it as takers. And so that will change all the dynamics in the world. And we, as white identified, European, whatever you want to call us, Italian, we it's our turn to serve. Tell us how we can be of service. Okay. And that's, I'm going to close on that note. Thank you all for being here. Feel free to uh, correspond, and let's keep this thing going. And if the book on Amazon, or my book actually on Amazon, you can get it for $10. But if I'm not trying to make money off. I'm trying to get the message out. And there's references in here on what you can do, the organizations you can join, as our brother was talking about, Guy, to work together to perform this service. But I'm not trying to make money off the book. If you want a copy, I have a PDF free version of an abridged copy I can email to you. If you're local, I can give you copies. You know, I'm I'm just trying to get the message out and share the learning, the rich learning experiences that I've had. Thanks again, Courtney, and the village here. It takes a village to raise us all.